Hello.
Hi.
It's always awkward because it's like hello, but I also said hello to you literally like 10 minutes ago. No, but you know what? I'm so excited to to be talking to you today.
Me too.
Like we worked together, which I really liked. We collaborated a
Mhm.
little bit. Which was really exciting. I loved making with you in a very
Mm.
virtual way, which is really cool. And now obviously you're doing a lot more, which we're going to get people to talk about a little bit.
Awesome.
And so that's what's really exciting. And today's topic is really cool because it's all about AI, which I feel like is buzzword of the moment. So
Totally.
that will also be really, really impactful for people. But please introduce yourself to the people. Who are you? What do you
Yeah.
do?
I am Lala Noel. I am an artist from
Mhm.
Toronto,
Yeah.
Ontario, Canada. Singer, songwriter, thinker of thoughts, you know?
Yes. Yeah. No. Like that is when I saw everything that you put up, even in your work, even in your art, and I listen to your music too,
Mm.
there is a certain intelligence to all of it. And
Thank
I think
you.
a lot of it feels very informed,
Mm.
even when you're evaluating emotion, which I really love, which you do a lot in
Wow.
your music.
Thank you.
But also at the same time, I think, when I watch, even when you are just talking to us as an audience, you are talking with knowledge, with
Mm.
research, which I love, you know? And your work is actually like really got a lot of breadth to it, which is also really cool. You're doing a lot of really cool stuff. So,
That's so kind.
in terms of like what you're up to, like in the last little while, like where are we at? Are we creating new music? Are we vibing out? What are we doing?
Yeah, constantly vibing out, always vibing out. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm working on a album for myself, a couple of projects
Yay.
that will hopefully be out in the new year in 2025. I'm also working on stuff with an artist that I work on named Aysanabee, who's an amazing Indigenous artist from
Mhm.
uh, Sandy Creek First Nation in Thunder Bay, but resides in Toronto and is signed to Ishkade Records and is distributed through Universal. And we've got a
Mm.
couple of songs coming out next year. And yeah, a bunch of projects I'm super excited about.
No, those sound super compelling. Super excited to see what it is that's going to come out of it.
Thanks,
I
hon.
also am very excited to just hear more from you, which is really cool.
Oh,
Uh, and speaking of hearing about you, we were talking a lot about your recent reel, which was covering a really interesting topic that I've had
mm,
a lot, like it's been on my mind a lot. And, AI is in the zeitgeist as the way that it is.
totally.
I have a very different perspective because I tend to work in tech. And so my perspective seems to really come from more of the creation side of it.
Right.
There is a different perspective that is to be had, when you are being impacted by what is being created.
Hmm.
And that I think is really, really where, when I saw your reel, I was like, no, this is very, very cool. But also the fact that you had actually like read and listened to a lot of work prior meant that, you were like, okay, no, it's impacting me, but I need to understand this. I need to wrangle my mind around this. Right.
Absolutely.
So as one of the bigger questions for me, really broadly is just when AI is said to you, as an artist right now, um, what does that incite? Is there a sense of fear? Is there a sense of embracing this? Is there a sense of uncertainty?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's definitely all of it.
Yeah.
I'd say I think that I've been following along with a lot of kind of the innovations in terms of the actual tech and also the ways that it's been impacting different creative fields. I
Mhm.
think that the strike that happened in Hollywood was
Yeah.
such like a great indicator of the ways in which unionized bodies of artists can really come together and be like,
Hmm.
actually, we see what's coming
Yeah.
and we want to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think they did such an amazing job of putting in guardrails to make sure that they don't get basically like entirely replaced by the technology that's coming.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's so, and we can get into it now or later whenever you want to,
Yeah.
but
No, now's a good
it's
time.
okay, cool. It's how kind of disjointed the music industry is in
Mhm.
terms of like artists themselves being able to come together and do kind of the same sort of thing. It's not really possible in the same ways, and
Mhm.
because of that, I think that what AI is kind of on the precipice of doing to our industry
Mhm.
is can like, yeah, it is scary. It is scary.
Yeah.
If we
Yeah.
don't kind of get ahead of some of
Of
these
what it is.
conversations.
I think it's very true. And I think one of the key things I think it's really highlighting is the fact that we've lost this sense of protection, which has also come
Mhm.
from our unity, right? I think,
Totally.
when unions were formed, back in the day, the purpose of the union was really to ensure and protect the people,
Uh-huh.
right? We've forgotten and we've actually like kind of really deviated away from that in our own
Mhm.
individualistic ways because our society really
Totally.
drives us to be individuals.
Mhm.
Whereas now, I think more than ever, there is a need for us to like reevaluate what it actually means to be a union of people, right? And also to
Completely.
preserve certain things, right?
Mhm.
At the end of the day, we are not just preserving jobs, you're preserving thought, you're preserving
Mhm.
life, right? And
Mhm.
that I think is really, really critical. And I think people really tend to miss that when they actually are like, oh, why are people reacting to AI? No, it's just, it's producing things for us, it's making things quicker. I'm like, no, there is a loss, right? That comes with
Completely.
that. And so that's really key. Musically, I think as well, like as you were saying, the industry is structured in a very specific way.
Mhm.
I think AI is challenging that structure.
For
Would
sure.
you agree with that? Would you feel like this is, yeah,
Oh, I totally agree with that. I think that because the thing is like I understand also like the tools that AI is allowing us to
mhm,
have in order to support some of these
mhm,
creative endeavors are amazing. Like there's this plugin called Soothe that is basically like an AI not generator, but it allows kind of the sibilance in a vocal performance to be taken out without an
mhm.
engineer having to go in piece by piece,
Right?
kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there's menial work that happens that can really like support a creative endeavor. But
Mhm.
when we're talking about like somebody just told me, and I don't even want to say the name of the website, but like you can go in and
Yeah.
just like I want a country song that kind of sounds like this
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
has this kind of like instrumentation, and they can just generate it in seconds. And that
Mhm.
kind of thing, I feel like, can be so dangerous to the
Of
people who have
course.
dedicated their lives
Their lives
to
to
being,
it. Yeah.
yeah, totally.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. And I think when you are talking about that, one of the key things that really, struck me is the fact that even that generation that will happen, whatever that,
Mhm.
whatever will come out of that model, that has a data set that it worked off of. That data
Right.
set was someone's work, right?
Totally,
And
totally.
that's the difficulty. That's the difficulty in the sense that that is not, it seems genuine. It seems like this is something that's novel, but it
Mhm.
actually isn't. It's a derivative, right? You have
It's
taken
yeah,
and taken and taken and then created, right?
completely. And I don't
Hmm.
know if that's something that like is also being legislated
Yeah.
you know, I don't, not even against, but like
Mhm.
taken into consideration for legislation because it is like, as you say, a bunch of people's work that's
Yeah.
just basically being siphoned and recreated in this way that's like so of the time. It's very
Mhm.
postmodern. It's very like the TikTokification
Yeah.
of music. And I
Yeah.
so see like the beauty in it, but when there's no acknowledgement of source material and the work that people, actual humans have done and
100%.
dedicated their lives to, then it's just like appropriation, is it not?
No, it is. And
Yeah,
that for like very great use of that word. One of the things I was reading this week is like, OpenAI is being sued, right? Also by, for example,
yeah,
the New York Times,
totally.
and a couple of other places, just
Yeah,
because they are like, they used that data. They did not take any kind of acknowledgement for that data.
yeah,
And appropriation is a really good word. One of the things that actually struck me when I was reading this article, this week was this feels in many ways like a form of colonization. And I
oh,
was actually talking
absolutely.
about the fact that, if I house data, I'm immediately at a superiority to everyone around me. And
Hmm.
now that I've taken the data and I can use and manipulate and do what I want with the data, I've taken advantage of people, right?
Completely.
And you are literally doing a lot of this on a more digital way. Before maybe it happened in a more physical way, but this is a more digital manifestation of that, right? Where
Completely.
you are taking originality, you are taking ideas, you're taking thought,
Hmm.
and just taking and not giving, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. It's so
yeah.
extractive and it's so capitalist and it's
Hmm.
so like on the edge of kind of all of the things going on in the world right now that are feeling the pressure and the friction of a system that is designed for capital as opposed to for humans.
100%.
Um, and yeah, I think we're all in, all industries, but definitely
Yeah.
in the creative industries feeling the effects of that.
100%. One of the things I liked that you also brought out is the fact that, there is a reason why maybe AI could be functional, even within a musical workflow, where
Mhm.
menial tasks, maybe things that are kind of efficiency builders could actually, be viewed, like you could actually use AI to kind of fix
Totally.
those gaps, right?
Mhm.
But it is in the generation, it is in the ideation, it is in the creation.
Mhm.
And one of the things I really loved that I was, listening to recently is the fact that AI can do a lot. The one thing that AI cannot do is think for itself. It cannot
Idea.
generate. It cannot on its own compose. It cannot
Mhm.
ideate. None of those things exist, right?
Mhm.
And that's where the human aspect of it is so key, is because we literally will be giving it that, that insight and that functional know-how, right?
Absolutely.
When it comes to you creating musically, do you write? I mean, you can talk a little bit about your process or not talk about your process. It's entirely up to you. I know it's also so hard to talk about process when it comes
No,
to
I'd love
anything
to. Love to.
creative.
Yeah.
But when it comes to you actually generating ideas,
Mhm.
like, do you feel in any ways that this is something that a machine could easily parallel for me or no? You know?
Um, that's a great question. I hope not. I think that, I mean, the thing is like OpenAI and generative AI has access to all of written human history, right?
Yeah.
So all of humans' musings on what it is to be a human on Earth,
Mhm.
um, which, would take it, like it's not possible for a human to have access to and to have actually processed that
All
much.
of that.
Exactly. So I think that there definitely will be and are ways that maybe AI can um, mimic or parrot
Mhm.
some of the human experience. But I would like to think that the actual, like, I don't know, unknown
Mhm.
human soul is not something that can be replaced.
No,
That's what I'm banking on.
it's very, very important you said that, because one of the highlights for me during your reel was the fact that you talked explicitly about the fact that it's going to be really hard for anything that is generated from a machine to have a soul the way
Mhm.
that it is. And especially when it comes to your work, when I listen to your music, there is a lot of depth there. There is a lot of experience there. And I don't think you could teach that experience. And I don't think you could directly translate that experience, into something that is computable by a neural network in any capacity.
Right. I
But what
hope.
I really hope not, but I think that is also for me, like, that's where I find solace in a lot of it, right?
Mhm.
I really find solace in the fact that, like, we still have that element of us that keeps us human, that keeps
Mhm.
us real, right? And
Mhm.
it is that connection. When it comes to you creating now, like, do you feel in any ways that you are now being challenged in terms of how you create because now AI is going to be there? Or are you just going to still create in the same free way that you've created all along?
I think okay. So part of what I have been ingesting in terms of the research that I've done is
Mm-hmm.
um, there's a couple of classes on masterclass that are creatives talking about how they integrate some AI tools into
Mm-hmm.
their process, and they use like prompts from AI and things like that. And that's all well and great, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not something that I'm particularly interested in doing myself. Um, I think that it's uh, again a great tool, and I don't knock anybody for trying to integrate new technology into the ways that we do things.
Yeah.
'Cause whether or not we like it, AI is coming and it's here.
Yeah.
Um, but my interest is in the fallibility of human interaction and the ways that
Mm-hmm.
we are imperfect, even when we try and show up the best for
Mm-hmm.
ourselves and each other. Um, so that it's just not something that I really think is going to be useful,
Mm-hmm.
at least in the creation process for myself going forward. But I
Yeah.
mean, I'm open to having that challenge.
No, I mean, that's really reassuring to hear, because I feel for a lot of artists right now, like I work with a lot of like photographers and a lot of
Mm.
people doing visual media. And one of the things that they talk a lot about is the fact that it's hard not to feel influenced by
Mm,
this, right?
right.
Because, when you are like, we consume so much visually or orally. And so when you're seeing and hearing things and you're like, oh, this is a new beat or this is like something that I visually see, it's
Mhm.
immediately in your brain. And then when you are like, for me, like one of the hardest things right now, and, is really like, even when I am creating an animation or I'm doing something of the sort, it's really hard for me not to have flashes in my brain of like a video I've seen on Instagram that was probably AI generated.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, oh no, like now this is the mood, like this is what I'm going to
Yeah.
want to put out there. So, to distance yourself from that. And I like what it was like before, where generation was not happening for me in that way. Like when I
Mm,
was coming up with an idea, it was literally just like me being outside in the world and
totally.
engaging with something. And then I'm like,
Mhm.
no, this would be really cool. And it was immediately for me like a calling card to be like, Kareem, it's time to put down the phones. It's time to put
Yeah.
things and just go back into the world, like
Yeah.
escape into reality a little bit and kind of just and have an experience and then come
Good.
back and create.
I'm
You know,
glad.
no, I think that it's key, right? Like I think that's that. Well, for all of us, I feel like as creators, like that's you have to like you cannot
You have
lose
to.
that
You
part of
do
it. You
have to.
have
It's
to,
so true.
yeah.
Because it's also
One.
like I was
Hmm,
so sorry to
no,
cut you off, but
but
I was listening to the Hard Fork podcast, that one of the New York Times
hmm,
podcasts that really is up on the cutting edge of things
hmm,
today. And they were talking about this experiment that was done last year, and the findings just came out this year about AI um, and doctors
oh, yeah,
and the medical system. I
yeah,
know. And it
yeah,
was like
yeah,
they
yeah,
had three separate kind of control groups, and one they basically gave each control group a set of uh potential symptoms, like
yeah.
thought experiments basically. And they were like, a 45-year-old man comes in with these symptoms. He's like experiencing this. He's having trouble
Mhm,
breathing. He can
mhm,
walk, you know. And the first group was, oh God, I hope I remember this correctly. The first group was doctors uh, just on their own.
yes.
The second group was doctors with the help of ChatGPT. They could ask ChatGPT any questions they wanted about,
Mhm,
past precedents set
yeah,
from
yeah.
cases. And then the third control group was just ChatGPT answering these symptoms. And it was
Yeah.
basically like some of the hardest um, uh, things to diagnose
Mhm,
in the world. So they were
mhm.
supposed to be hard, and they were supposed to kind of challenge everybody involved. And their findings were that the group that did the best was ChatGPT on their
Yeah.
own,
Yeah.
and not
Yeah.
even humans with the
No.
help of AI. Just and it's so wild because doctors are, you know what I mean? It's like doctors are now going through this exact thing. It's like
Yeah.
they are, they have now basically become, at least for this particular part of what doctors do,
Mhm.
which is like the diagnosis part,
Card. Yeah.
like outperforming actual humans,
Yeah.
which is, in a way great because more people will get the care that they
Mhm,
actually need and people will be
mhm.
safer and healthier. On the other hand, it's like there are people in medical school who are dedicating
Lit.
their time and lives to
Yep.
this whole thing. And
Yep.
it's like, what is it
Yeah.
for? And I think it really begs the question, what is it that we as a human collective
Mhm,
are interested in supporting? It's like
mhm,
we need to, like, when we take this whole concept of AI to its like natural, like, um, think it through to the natural end of
mhm.
what could potentially happen.
Yeah.
Are we interested in having a world where everything is accessible and laid out to us?
Mhm.
Or are we interested in a world where we have experiences that allow us to feel things
Feel things.
and enjoy a life that is full? You know what I
Yep.
mean? And
Absolutely.
yeah, it's so interesting to me because it's like now people get to, I guess, contemplate um, more thoroughly what it is that they are spending their times doing and why. It's like,
Mhm.
do you want to invest in 10 years of medical school because you want to prove to yourself that you're capable of it?
Yeah.
And if not, what else is it that you are getting out of it?
Right. But like, I read the written version of what it is you're talking about.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of things that really struck me. The first one was, I think it will demotivate people, right? Like you'll
Mhm.
wonder, why would I go to vet school and why would I put myself through this if now there is something around this? But one of
Right.
the counterpoints to that, is the fact that when it is giving you a diagnosis, that's a very clear cut, clinical, very objective diagnosis.
Mhm.
One of the key parts of medicine that I think is really critical to medicine
Mhm.
is the human element, right? When
Totally.
you are
Totally.
getting a diagnosis and a human is telling you what to expect, how to expect, there is an emotion behind it, there is an
Mhm.
element of security that comes from it.
Mhm.
That is completely lacking. You're going to, when you talk to machine, none of that exists, right?
Yeah.
And they can feign emotion, but
Right.
you will read through that right away. Like humans are very good at reading through that right away. So that element of it was like, I was like, no, like care also requires emotion. Like I feel better
Absolutely.
when, for example, like when my physician is mothering me and I
Mm.
just feel like I'm being held right now. So you know what?
Yeah.
It's all going to be okay. And they could be saying the worst possible thing, but I have faith in you because this is amazing, right? The
Absolutely. And I
second part of that,
sorry, go ahead.
good.
No, 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 no.
No,
Go ahead.
no, I'll be quick. But the second part of it was, when it comes to what they could actually do,
Mhm.
um, the one thing that they could not, I think they were talking about the fact that like when you come up with those diagnoses right now, you are typically coming out with an element of awareness, maybe of what the end state will be. When
Mm.
you are thinking about like, okay, if I'm like going through this process and like looked at all the histories, all the surgeries that this person has been through, you are aware, like, okay, like this person might require an extensive amount of care later.
Right.
And maybe now you need to kind of like piecework the diagnosis a little bit
Mm.
to, make sure that you're not getting to that detrimental end. I don't think the machine algorithm would be that clear in understanding that end state because I don't think the machine, well, I'm hoping the machine is not going to perform surgery on us,
Who
but
knows? Who
God
knows?
forbid, but who knows, right? But like they would not have that lived experience, right? And so
Mm.
I think there is all those elements, very similar to what it is that happens with you, where
Mm.
you have had a lived experience that you have brought that cannot easily be replicated. And that I think is really what I was like, okay, this sounds, very like dystopian, but also at the same time, I have faith that they're not going to do that. But please go
Yeah.
ahead with your point. Mhm.
Of course. I think always, all I was going to say is that I think that
Mhm.
part of the other thing, as like you said, people will be demotivated for sure.
Mhm.
And I'm sure across the board in all fields, people are going to be demotivated.
Yeah.
Um, but I know that there will still be some people, and
Yeah.
hopefully, like if we're thinking about best case scenarios here, it will be the people that are actually galvanized and excited about the idea of taking care of people. As you said, it's
Yes.
like
Yeah.
those who are there for the actual reasons of
Mhm.
medicine and healing
Exactly.
will be in the positions to support AI in making sure that people get what they need, which is
Totally.
great.
Yeah, I know. And it's exactly that. Like I personally feel, you know what it is for us too. It's like you cannot, we're looking at it from a perspective of years of building out a way of understanding the world.
Mm,
This is really challenging how you understand the world, right?
totally.
And so all our systems, which we have built and the ways in which we interpret things and go into situations
Mhm.
was so patterned for us for a long time. This
Totally.
is basically like breaking that. So now it's asking you the question, like, what kind of doctor are you? Like, if I'm doing the diagnosis part for you, what is your value?
Mhm.
Very upfront. Or,
Yeah.
I always, like, I joke with my developers sometimes. I'm like, well, at this point, I can generate code without you. And frankly, like, like what's going to happen? And so then they were like, no, but it's also like, what is it? It's almost like asking the question, like, what is it to be a developer, right? Was
Mm,
it just
mhm.
writing code? No,
Right.
it wasn't just writing code, right? So we need to re-examine what we're doing and how
Absolutely.
we're doing things, because I think it's really asking us to be very focused on what are you and what do you want to do, you
Totally.
know?
And they're like existential questions, really. It's like,
Yeah, absolutely.
what is it to be in the world? What are the
Hmm.
experiences we want to have before we die?
Yeah.
And I think it's wonderful as a person who, I mean, I've always loved philosophy. It's
Hmm.
what I went to U of T for before I went to music school.
Hmm.
And thinking about the world and our place in it, I think is something that has been a privilege for a lot of people with
Hmm.
access to a certain lifestyle and should be something that more people have access to,
Yeah.
and hopefully won't be burdened with not being able to think about these questions because they have to work so diligently to just put food on the table and a roof over their
A
heads.
100%. A
Yeah.
100%. One of the last few questions I have for you, actually, and this is something that I think maybe it's one of the bigger topics that I think is coming out of a lot of this is, this idea behind bias. And one of the things
Mhm.
that you do as an artist a lot of the times is you see past boundaries, which is, I think, what makes you very powerful as an
Mm.
individual in this world is the fact that you are transcending groups, right? Music itself is not something that I feel like is for a group. I think it's something that exists for all of us in all
Mm.
capacities and all understandings, right?
Totally.
But machinery and especially AI is programmed. And that means we program into a lot of our machinery, whether it's us feeding specific data sets to it, or it's
Yeah.
how we're actually putting in logic of thought reasoning for it that introduces a lot of bias into this. And so that
Right.
will obviously impact us in many ways. Do you have any thoughts around this? Do you have any feelings around what this will
Yeah,
mean
I
for
think
us?
it's scary. It's really scary.
Mm.
Because again, it's like AI has access to all of human history, and
Yeah.
most of human history is us being terrible to each other. And so I think that if we don't have people who are specifically tasked in these companies that are on the
Mhm.
cutting edge of things, tasked with making sure that equity and kindness and true, like an economic understanding of the world in terms of
Mhm.
balance is set in place, then
Yeah.
we really are like going to be in a lot of trouble
A
very,
lot of
very
trouble.
soon.
No, you're very, very right. And I think that that is like one of the things that I feel for me, like really concerns me the most is like, I was talking, like somebody the other day was showing me a banking application that will automatically make decisions. For example, if you decide to to apply for a mortgage, right?
Okay.
And so the system will decide for you. And it's only if you flag it as a concern in its decision that it then gets investigated for them to actually do the work. However, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, how many people would actively flag this? And also, are you going to take every flag seriously? Like, it's a lot of that element of like, why is the onus on us? Like, why couldn't
Right.
it just have been built responsibly from the ground up?
Yeah.
Right. And I think when I looked at what, you talked about with music as a whole, it's the same thing in a lot of ways, right? The technology is being built without this idea of consultation, without this idea of understanding where people are coming from. We're
Mhm.
using information without any repercussion, right?
Mm.
And that makes it really difficult because now it exists. And then for us to say, okay, now we have to rein it in, it's even harder, right?
Totally. Totally.
So for me, music, I think, will be one of the things to watch because I feel there is a lot at stake, but I also feel at the same time, it is where we will learn a lot of
Yeah.
lessons very
For
quickly,
sure. For
right?
sure. I totally agree. And I think it's like it sucks that it does. You're right. Like the onus does have to be on, or is at this point on
Mm.
consumers to kind of make the decision whether or not to engage in
Yeah.
these things. But I can see a world where, like in music, there's a whole kind of enclave of artists who
Mhm.
specifically love doing like analog recording and like
Mhm.
record to tape and like only print vinyls and like have no interest in having a digital footprint,
Yeah, yeah,
which is so cool. And it does kind of create a strong sense of community for people who are like,
yeah,
this is important to me because
yeah.
it harkens back to the true like tactile nature of um, music making from the past.
Mhm.
Um, and it doesn't necessarily have to be something that feels kind of I don't know, like what's the word I'm looking for? Like archaic. Like it's
Mhm.
not to say that those things are vestiges of the past and are
Right.
archaic, but
Yeah.
something beautiful that is human that deserves to be celebrated and
Mhm.
supported.
Yeah, no, I feel for me like that is the way to go. I think we need to become exponentially more analog in a lot of our ways in life. I think we
Mhm.
need to detach from technology after a while. I feel like that
Totally.
it's not necessarily like it's not the reward that it's meant to be, even though
No.
it presents itself as that. I was watching this really like cool video the other day where someone literally got off their phone for 30 days and they basically got like a really old Nokia, like it didn't have a GPS, it had nothing in it.
Nice.
I think it could only receive email or text.
So,
But they had to like figure out the world, right? And they
yeah.
were having such a challenge because they were like, there's no GPS. I can't go on maps. I don't know where this location is. They'd write all their directions on their hand. But they were also creators. So they created a lot of stuff on Blender. And so they were saying, the interesting thing that happened is because they'd gone so analog, when they
Mhm.
went into Blender to create, it was actually much easier. They were not only faster, but
Oh,
they were
cool.
also more inspired because, interestingly enough, there was more space mentally to think,
Mm,
right? Where
totally.
they're not
Totally.
just they were not just being cluttered with thoughts of like the last 10 posts that they saw. There was a
Completely.
freedom to all of this. So even the ideas felt richer. Everything felt
Mhm.
more thought through, so that
Totally.
was kind of like for me the calling card to be like, no, we need to go to an analog perspective. For the last few minutes,
No.
I was wondering if you have any final thoughts you know, around AI, like any words of, encouragement, words of comfort, words of hope.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question.
Hmm,
Words of hope.
hmm,
I think so. I hope that anybody listening to this,
hmm,
anybody that is engaging with these conversations, that is interested in um human versus machine
hmm.
experiences and connection,
Yeah.
decides for themselves and really has a hard look at the type of future that they want to see.
Hmm,
Because it's really in our hands more than
hmm.
I think we really realize,
Yeah.
whether or not these things change the way that we interact with each other for the
Hmm.
better or for the worse. Um, so I think that the worst case scenario does not have to happen unless we allow it to happen. And I think that's important
100%.
to kind of keep in mind.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think people, we're very good at being complacent in and just being and easily saying to ourselves, oh, it's far more monumental than we make it. But the reality is we feed that machine, right?
Totally.
We literally could wake up tomorrow and just say, you know what? It's time for me to stop giving my data away. It's time for me to actually like stop putting my thoughts out there in this way.
Yeah.
I can control it, right?
Mhm.
But this was really, really insightful. And I think like you've given, I'm hoping people will get a lot of thought around this. I also feel like you've really inspired me to kind of be more critical in my understanding of the space. And you're giving me more of a breadth of, understanding of the impact of what this is doing for us, which has been really great. So I really
Yay.
appreciate you. I really appreciate the time that you've
Oh
taken
my
to join
gosh.
us. So,
An absolute pleasure.
mm,
So good to see your face.
yeah, no, it was really, really nice. And hopefully we'll do a follow up in a few months. Hopefully, because, at this point, AI grows by the minute. So we will have more to talk about at that particular point in time. But thank you so
Absolutely.
much for stopping by.
So,
I loved it.
yay.